I mean, we have more than 800 licensed Palestinian guides, if not 1,000. But only 50 are allowed to guide inside the Israeli territories. Imagine, 50. Just imagine how is the percentage. It's less than 10%. These people doesn't have the chance to tell their stories, their experience. I mean, it's very important. There was a very famous speech by one of the Israeli leaders in the 60s, Moshe Dayan, who said it's easier for Israel to license a Palestinian to become a pilot in the Air Force than licensing him to become a guide. Because when he is a guide, he tells his story, his family story, his story as a Palestinian.
Welcome to Roots and Rights, a podcast by the Balasan Initiative for Human Rights, Palestine, which guides you through the most critical human rights issues facing Palestine today. I'm your host, Dalia Qumsiye, a lawyer, a director, and the founder of the Balasan Initiative for Human Rights. Today's episode is part 2 of a series that explores Israel's monopoly over the religious tourism sector in Palestine and its negative impacts on the Palestinian economy and society. An issue we covered at the Balasan Initiative with our report titled Religious Tourism in the Occupied Palestinian Territory, Monopoly, Exclusion, and Entrenchment of Israel's Annexation, which you can find on our website. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I recommend that you check it out first. Joining us today is Mr. Michael Awad, the president of the Incoming Tour Operators Association and the manager of the Angels Tours for Travel and Tourism in Bethlehem, to walk us through how people on the ground are experiencing Israel's restrictive policies on the tourism sector. Welcome, Michael. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for hosting me. It's a pleasure.
Michael, can you start by introducing yourself and telling us a bit more about your work and how you got into this business?
My name is Michael Awad. I'm the president of the board of directors of the Holy Land Incoming Tour Operator Association. The association, it's an umbrella of the around 45 tour operators that brings around 35 to 40% of the incoming tourism to the region. I'm also the owner of Angels Tours. I've started working in the tourism field since 1999. And we are mostly concentrating on the incoming tour operator in different type of tourism. We operate on the pilgrimage, we operate on the experiential tourism, fact-finding, cultural. So we have wide range of programs that we offer to international who's willing to visit the region. And as a president of the association, also we are working to also bring a new kind of programs and experience to the people who's willing to visit the area. Because as you know, most of the people who comes to visit Palestine is mostly pilgrimage backgrounded, but we would like to ask them more to encounter the local community and getting more closer to the culture, as Palestine is not only is a pilgrim religious destination, it also has a lots of cultural and cultural aspects.
That's amazing. Thank you, Michael. To create some context, can you tell us a bit about the history of religious tourism in Palestine? Like how long have the pilgrims been coming to Palestine? Who has been welcoming them? What influences has religious tourism had on the local culture, society, economy in Palestine just in general and in Bethlehem in particular?
Yes, as far as I know, I mean, pilgrimage started in the Middle Ages, I mean, since decades. And people were coming here to visit Jerusalem and Bethlehem since long time. I mean, starting in the first 19th century, I mean, there was a kind of initiative of people who's guiding these pilgrimage and telling them more about the story and the history. Just like, not just, they were coming before just for visits and pray. And the idea started in 19th century to give them guidance about the history, about the people, about the religious aspect, about the Bible sites. So that started in the area of 19th century, that some people get as a professional to guide this pilgrimage and tell them more about the story. And slowly there was a need for organizers to organize where they will overnight, where they will stay. So the idea started, I think, since the 1940. There was a start of a new kind of people we call them organizers. And slowly after the 48, we have started to registered as tour operators who can function for organizing all aspects of their visits. And we have members in our association. They start operating as a tour operator since 1964 in Jerusalem. So it's a long history of these people who's working. I mean, it was a generation giving the lead to other generations.
Israel exercises absolute authority over who can cross into Palestine. This control is far-reaching, encompassing all entry points, rejecting or accepting visas, and the power to vet every visitor. For example, tourists suspected of having affiliations deemed undesirable by Israel can either be summarily denied entry or expelled at the airport even before they set foot in Palestine. What impact is this having on your tourist agency and others?
I mean, this is a great impact with different issues. Let's start with the first issue. The first issue, I mean, some people who's really supporting Palestine cause. Some of them are very active and they are willing to come and visit and bring in groups. Like we have one of our two leaders who's from Ireland. She were deported from the airport since 4 years and she cannot bring groups that time. So we lost her as a tour leader bringing groups to our side. The other side is the Islamic pilgrimage. I mean, there is many countries who are willing to come to visit Palestine, but because their country doesn't have any diplomatic relation with Israel, that prohibit them to come for a visit. So there is many countries that doesn't have any diplomatic relation with Israel are not willing to come, couldn't come. And the second issue, there is many people who are supporter of BDS. They are just being denied at the airport. They cannot come. They are very active. They are willing to come. So that's lots of issue that prohibit us from working in different kind of other kind of programs, like the fact-finding programs, the solidarity programs. All of these regulation do not give us really flexibility to work. And the second issue, I mean, people who's coming just to visit Bethlehem. Sometimes when they just arrive at Tel Aviv airport and tell them, I'm going to Bethlehem, sometimes it gets more question to them, delays. So that makes really an issue for people to say that I'm coming to Bethlehem or coming to Ramallah or coming to Jericho. So that's really, some people are afraid to come because of these delays or deportation at the Tel Aviv airport.
When pilgrims are able to come to Palestine, they often either book a tour with an Israeli agency or with a Palestinian agency. What kind of experience do pilgrims have with these two different agencies?
I mean, the main difference is that Palestinian tour operator is sometimes concentrating more on the cultural side. I mean, some of our members, they do like a cultural night for them, like with a debka dance and local food, and they encounter them, they meet them, they count them. More Israelis, they just work on mass tourism, that there is no interaction between the local community and the visitors. So we as a Palestinian tour operators, we try to concentrate more on the personal interaction, on the cultural side, about the food, about the culture, about all of these things makes visits, adds to the visit of the tourists and give them a better experience. That's the main issue. I mean, Israeli tour operators have more accessibility to the area, to the airports, to the sites. We have a Palestinian less of this accessibility, but we can operate the same as the Israelis. We have the same accessibility to book any hotels in the region, but sometimes they have privilege because of the support of the government for the promotion, the storytelling. We do not have such governmental support regarding the side of the storytelling.
Michelle, what role does tourism play in shaping visitors' perceptions of Palestine, and what are some of the results of this perception?
I mean, the visitor's visit is very important to create about the perception. I mean, most of the people who comes to Palestine have a most of them, negative perception about the reality and the people. And when they come, they get a really like a shocking experience. Shocking not about the reality, about what they've been knowing and what they seeing. Like, I mean, some of the people, when we make an evaluation for visitors who encounter local community, I mean, like who goes for a hike or stay with a local family, they tell us it was a shocking experience, a life experience, because we come with a different perception, and now we are leaving with a new perceptions. So it's a life experience. It's a life changing, because people what they see in the media, unfortunately, media only sell the negative in news about Palestine, about conflict, about violent. But when they come and see the beauty of the country, the hospitality of the local community, they get really shocked. And these people, some of them, I mean, I have some of the visitors who I encounter in personal level, and they are now friends with me on Facebook. They are very active, posting a positive story about Palestine, about the experience they get, pictures. Some of them are travel writers. They wrote a very nice articles about their experience. So, I mean, slowly, people are getting more to know that what they see in the media, it's totally different about the reality. And that's why we said that pilgrimage, unfortunately, the mass tourism does not make a change of the people's perception, because they come as a group running to the church, running out to the church. It doesn't make. That's why, as an association, we try to motivate our members to put some elements in the pilgrimage program to allow these pilgrimage to encounter the local communities.
Now, let's talk a bit more about the challenges that Palestinian tour guides face, and tour agencies as well, when competing for hosting pilgrims from abroad.
First of the main challenge that tour guides, Palestinian tour guides, is facing is that they are not allowed to get a permission to guide in both Palestinian and Israeli areas. I mean, it's mostly in the Israeli areas. I mean, we have more than 800 licensed Palestinian guides, if not 1,000. But only 50 are allowed to guide inside the Israeli territories. Imagine, 50. Just imagine how is the percentage. It's less than 10%. So the issue is that these people doesn't have the chance to tell their stories, their experience. I mean, it's very important. And we just remember there was a very famous speech by one of the Israeli leaders in the 60s, Moshe Dayan, who said it's easier for Israel to license a Palestinian to become a pilot in the Air Force than licensing him to become a guide. Because when he is a guide, he tells his story, his family story, his story as a Palestinian. So see how much this is. And also there was lots of legal calls in the Knesset by the Israelis tour guides association against giving the Palestinian tour guides any kind of these permissions. So from 1,000, we have 50 people. The same for a tour operator. Sometimes as a tour operator, we do not get the permission to be able to enter Israeli territories or getting to meet our people, or some of our workers do not get the permission to go and join the tours that we have in the Israeli territory. So there is a lots of challenges regarding the accessibility as a Palestinian who lives in West Bank. So that's why we cooperate a lot with Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem or in the north of Palestine, because they have more accessibility. We just, hire them as a guides or as a drivers because they have more accessibility. But we, as a Palestinian who have Palestinian ID, we have lots accessibility, and that makes a really challenging regarding competition with the Israeli tour operator, because they have all these accessibility, and as a Palestinian holding a Palestinian ID, do not have such accessibility. I mean, in competition-wise, they have this advantage.
Absolutely. Some estimates have indicated that the tourism sector fell about or at least 75% since October the 7th. Can you tell us about the impact of the losses on the Palestinian economy? What are some of the industries affected, and how are people experiencing this overall, generally, and in Bethlehem in particular?
I mean, first, let me correct you. It's not 75, it is 95. I mean, since 7th of October, we have almost, in some areas, we have zero tourism. We have some solidarity groups who comes to visit, and either solidarity with the Israeli side or with the Palestinians. So we can say that 95% of the tourism just fall down. We having one of the main challenge that we face the same like the pandemic, the corona pandemic. But this is more harder because we have no tourism. In the same times, we are seeing the massacres that happening in Gaza, which really, it's really something that's really emotionally very hard on us. I mean, this is a great impact. I mean, let me give you some statistics. Tourism industry in Palestine is the second regarding the employment. It's the after the governmental. So regarding employment, we are the second. We are the third regarding the investment, and the fourth regarding the income generating to the GB. So see how much this is industry that from 100%, we were expecting 100% occupancy in hotels in October and November, to almost the first month was zero of occupancy in Palestinian hotels. Many of the workers, most of them lost their work, and unfortunately due to the war, during the pandemic, when there were no tourism, these workers were able to get a permission to work inside Israel. But now tourism is almost zero, and these workers who lost their works in the hotels or in the restaurants, they cannot get a permission to work in Israel. So, I mean, tourism is already closed, and at the same time, working in Israel is also closed. So it was harder than the pandemic. This war is really harder on the people who works in tourism, because in the pandemic they had some chance to work in Israel, to work on other side. And also the accessibility between Palestinian cities is very hard, because when the war started, airports were closed. We start thinking about local tourism, about domestic, about national tourism. But I mean also the checkpoints and the blocking all the roads between the Palestinian cities, and also blocking the roads between the Palestinians who live in Israel and here. It was really challenging also to attract some local tourism. So, I mean, it is really a big impact from all international tourism, domestic, and also for the employers.
That's a very stark reality. Foreign pilgrims have also recently faced increased aggression by extremist Jewish settlers, with increasing incidents of degrading treatment, such as the incident when Jewish settlers spat on Christian clergy. How is the experience of tourists changing post October the 7th?
I mean, for sure, after 7th of October, many people are now willing to know more about the reality in Palestine. They think that what's in the media is not on the reality, and they start reading, and I can see some of some of our friends who are abroad are trying to create more awareness about the reality. I mean, for sure, this war was very hard on our people, especially the massacres that happened in Gaza. But one of the small positive side was that it created more, like, motivate people to read more about the reality and why the Palestinian is getting all of these happening to the Palestinian, who's they have the rights. And so I think all these stories now come up about the discrimination that's happening against Christian in Palestine, about Christian in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, about the Easter, how was the Easter during the last Easter. So, I mean, all of this created like a motivation to people to know more about the story. And I think more people will be more willing to work with more Palestinian or Christian tour operators, because they said that these people really didn't get their chance to tell about themselves. So I think it will make a change. I mean, it will make a change, and all of these things will let people who was between, there was just in the middle about either to be with this side or this side. They were just now thinking that we should be with justice.
Now, what tips would you have for listeners who would love to visit Palestine but want to do so responsibly?
This is a very good question, Dalia. Thank you for asking. I mean, this is a very good question, because many people is willing to come, but they don't have the tools. They don't know how to come, because if you go in a Google and Google about how to be responsible in Palestine, you find something different about tourism. So this is a very good question to ask. So the most important is to encounter local community, use a local guide, use a local taxis, buy from a local supermarket, stay in a small guest houses, or stay with a family. Try as much to spend your time, just divide your time staying in a Palestinian territories and in Israel. Try as much to be balanced in using the Palestinian services and the Israeli services. Eat in a local restaurant, because all of these people who's here is waiting your visits for sure to give you a better experience. But in the same time, their financial income is a very important for them to stay and stay in this country. Part of the resistance. So, I mean, use the local, encounter local, talks with the local. I mean, as much as you can encounter local community, this makes really a responsible visit.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing insights and expertise in this sector, Michel.
Thank you so much, Dalia, for hosting me. And thanks for highlighting about tourism, because it's a very important tool. We consider tourism is a good tool to tell people about reality, because we always said people come and visit, because when they come and visit, it's make really a big change in their perception. So thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to be with you.
Pleasure was mine, Michel. Thank you. And thanks to our listeners for joining. Next week, we explore Israel's use of de-development as a tool of colonization and the impacts it has on various sectors in Palestine. If you like this episode and want to hear more, please follow us on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. You can also listen to and access our human rights reports on our website at balasan.org. All links are in the show notes. This podcast episode was produced by the Balasan Initiative for Human Rights.